Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cavanaugh's Corner. Today on the show I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite action films of all time. It's definitely one of those movies that really kind of changed the way we look at veterans in the cinema and, throughout the world. And it's a very important movie in my mind, and that is right here, First Blood, starring Sylvester Stallone, Richard Crenna, Brian Dennehy, and even David Caruso is a smaller part in this movie. And this is really a phenomenal film that I've always loved. I just want to tell you guys, I picked up all three Rambo movies here, or I should say the first three Rambo movies, but these are the ones that are available in 4K so far, so you're going to get 3 reviews over the next couple weeks, each for one of these movies. Today, though, I'm just going to be talking about First Blood. This disc here it's just released this past week, and I wanted to pick this up right away because this is definitely a movie that has kind of suffered in terms of condition over the years. This here is hands down the best this movie has ever looked. I really, really enjoyed this disc. It's not perfect, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute. But this movie to me is very special because it's one of the few movies that came out many years ago that dealt with Vietnam and really dealt with the idea of PTSD. And PTSD is not something to mess around with. Post-traumatic stress disorder is something that many veterans deal with. My grandfather dealt with it for many, many years after he returned from World War II. And I've known a lot of guys that have dealt with it through the years, whether they be in Vietnam, like Rambo, or it be Iraq, Afghanistan. And really, this is one of the first movies to ever deal with that. And it is, I love this movie. I mean, the movie is definitely not the most realistic thing ever, but to me, the performance that Stallone gives in this movie, not only is it an extremely physical performance, but it's heart-wrenching. His final scene, that monologue that he has at Richard Crenna at the end of the movie, is one of the most heartbreaking monologues. I like to call it the Stallone-alogue because that's really what I always call when he has a monologue in a movie. And he does. He has a lot of them in his movies. But his monologue about his friend getting blown up and how he breaks into tears at the end of the film, it really gives the character of Rambo something different, something that you really don't expect from the beginning of the film to the end of it. I can't get through that scene without tearing up. I just can't. It is, again, it's a phenomenal film. If you haven't seen this movie, please watch this film in some way. You will not regret it. Ironically enough, again, this is the first in the series, definitely my favorite in the series, and I have to say, this new 4K disc is pretty outstanding. The last time I saw this movie was on a Blu-ray that came out many years ago, right when the format really first came out, and it was okay for the time, but it really wasn't a very good picture on it. They seem to have lightened the film a lot. It also had actually had some damage in it, if my memory serves me correctly. So you could see scratches and tears and things like that, and it really was not the greatest disc of ever made. It was actually one of the lousier ones that I'd seen, but this one here, I'm glad to say, very happy to say, is completely remastered and restored. The picture on this, they really went back and did their best to clean it up. Studio Canal, that now owns, I think they've owned the rights to Rambo for a few years now, but they did a really phenomenal job with the restoration on this. The picture is crisp. There is film grain in it. Again, this movie did come out in 1980, I think it was. 1982. So it definitely does not look great. It's not the greatest picture I've ever seen on a 4K disc, but for this film, it looks really, really good. The film grain in it is not extremely heavy, but I'd say it's a medium. It is definitely grainy at times, especially in some of the darker scenes. The disc overall, the one thing I do want to mention of it though, if you're used to the old Blu-rays, or even the old DVDs of this, this is a much darker version of the film. The entire movie does seem a tad darker, and I think that's actually the way the movie is meant to be seen. The one thing I have to say about it, though, as I said, is that the detail level you get on this is actually really phenomenal. There's little things I've never noticed in the film before that I saw with this, and it's very striking when you watch it. The traps that Rambo sets for the sheriffs as they chase after him through the forest, you actually see little details on the traps now that I couldn't see before. Little things on his knife. I mean, there's a lot of detail in this disc. You can even make out Colonel Troutman's little emblems on his uniform. His colonel emblems are like very, very apparent in this. The black levels on this disc are okay. I wouldn't say they're perfect, but the scenes where Rambo is hiding in a cave, those are really, really dark now, and the black levels are not perfect in those scenes. Near the end of the film, where he goes back to the town and blows the hell out of everything, the explosions looked amazing, and I'm going to talk more about HDR in a minute. That's helped out a lot by the HDR, but the darkness of the town seemed to be a lot darker than what I'd seen before. And again, you can still make out detail in the dark, but those cave scenes are really rough. Those are some really, really dark scenes. And I think it even adds to the tension of the fact that, you know, it's pitch black in that cave. He's technically sealed in from one side, and it kind of adds to the suspense. But black levels on this are not perfect, but again, the movie is the best it's ever looked. Now, the next thing I'm going to get into is HDR in this. And it was something that it's been a little bit of confusion. The disc, when I originally read about it online, I remember reading something about all the new Rambo 4K discs having Dolby Vision. They don't. There is no Dolby Vision on any of the discs. I can tell you that now. There is no Dolby Vision on the Rambo discs. It's just HDR10, but the HDR10 does a really great job on this disc. And as I mentioned earlier, explosions, the green of the forest when he's running through the forest through most of the film, it is beautiful. The greens, the browns, you really get a sense of this deep forest. It's really beautiful. There's a scene where Rambo jumps off of a rock wall, off the side of like a cliff, and you really can see the little divots in the cliff. The colors of the rocks are like drastically different than what I'd seen before when they just seemed white. Now there's dark grays, there's whites, there's browns. It's a really beautiful transfer in terms of HDR usage. They did a really good job with that. Even like blood and stuff is very accentuated in this, even though the movie is extremely dark at times. They did a really good job with the HDR usage on this, and I have to give Studio Canal a big thumbs up for that. They did a really good job. Now, as for the sound in this, the sound in this is still a DTS HD 5.1 master. It is not a DTS X or anything like that. It's just 5.1. However, after watching this and revisiting the old Blu-ray sound is nothing compared to this. For some reason, I don't think it's the same sound mix. I really could not tell you, but the music in this seemed a little bit clearer. The overall audio throughout the film, sound effects and everything, they kept all the original sound effects as well, as something I want to mention. I didn't hear or detect any kind of new sound added to this, but they did a really good job making the audio very clear, very crisp. The dialogue was very, very clear. There were cuts of the film that I've seen before where Stallone's monologue near the end is kind of hard to make out. In this, it's crystal clear. They did a really good job with the sound mix. I was really hoping they would do a DTS-X or like a Dolby Atmos mix, but the 5.1 mix that's in this is really solid, and it's not bad for a movie that's, you know, almost 40 years old at this point. It's a pretty solid disc overall. Now, the other thing I want to mention on this is the fact that this does also come with the regular Blu-ray and a digital copy. The regular Blu-ray is a new Blu-ray, which is nice. The new Blu-ray is the restoration version. It's the new restored version in 1080, and there's a ton of special features on that Blu-ray disc. Oddly enough, they did not put any of the special features on the 4K disc except for a commentary. There's a commentary by the original author, David Morrell, who wrote First Blood, the novel. And there's another commentary with Sylvester Stallone. Those are actually really solid commentaries. I've listened to them in the past. Highly recommend you listen to them. But the new Blu-ray that's included in this also has a couple new special features, and they carried over all the old special features from the old Blu-rays and DVDs and such. I actually was really happy to see that they included the alternate ending of the film, as well as a funny outtake of the alternate ending that had me cracking up, which was really, really cool. Another deleted scene. The funny thing is, all these discs have something that kind of made me laugh. There's a misprint in the menu. There's a typo in the menus. Every disc has a restoration featurette that shows like what the movie looked like when they started and what it looked like after they restored it. And they misspelled restoration. Now, on the box, it's spelled correctly. In the menus, they spell restoration with a U instead of an O after the T, after the first T, R-E-S-T-U instead of T-O. And I think it might have been an English problem, because Studio Canal, I think, is a French company. And they spelled it restoration like restaurant, and that kind of cracked me up. But if you own the disc, look for the typo. It's kind of funny. Overall, I love this First Blood disc. This is an awesome new restored version of the film that's going to hold up for a long time. I really love this disc. I really love this movie. I picked it up for around $15, and that is really, I mean, $15 for a brand new, completely restored version of this film. It's a no-brainer. You got to buy it. I cannot see, if you don't like this movie, then maybe not. But if you're a fan of this film, you got to pick it up. You absolutely have to pick it up. It's awesome to see this movie fully restored, and it's a very rewarding experience overall. Anyway, I'm Andrew Cavanaugh. Thank you for coming back to Cavanaugh's Corner, and I'll see you on the next one, where I'll be talking about Rambo: First Blood Part 2. It's definitely another one of these classic action films, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. See you later.